Donnybrook is made possible by the members of the 9 Network.
I can't go on like this.
Happy New Year, and thanks so much for joining us for this edition of Donnybrook. And with this edition, we actually begin our 34th year on the 9 Network. Congratulations to everybody involved, and we want to meet those who are assembled around the big green table for this edition, starting with Wendy Weiss, the media veteran and the news director for the Big 550 KTRS. One of our founders who was back there in 1987 when it all began, Bill McClellan from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch.
It was like the Mouseketeers back then.
Yeah, well.
Bill.
We were
Ray.
kids.
Yeah.
Martin.
And Ray is still a kid, though, isn't he? Look at him. He's, of course, with the Riverfront Times and the Big 550 KTRS, and also the ever-youthful Alvin Reed from the Big 590.
Not born yet when all this started.
97.1 FM News Talk and the St. Louis American and beyond. And Bill, when you think about it, this is actually the 5th decade that Donnybrook is appearing in. The 80s, the 90s,
yes.
the first decade, the last decade, and this one.
Maybe we'll get one right.
So it's kind of like a birthday.
It is a birthday.
Well, in the very first show, we talked about whether the football team was going to leave St. Louis.
It was the Big Red.
It was the Big Red then, yeah.
It was the first show.
Before we begin with you, Bill, I just want to say happy birthday to Joe Prosperi, who's our social media guy, digital dude, and if you'd like to wish him a happy birthday, please do so at Donnybrook STL or hashtag Donnybrook STL.
Happy birthday, Joe.
Happy birthday, Joe. Absolutely. Okay, Bill, I want to start with you. Apropos of nothing, but pot was made legal for the first time yesterday in Illinois, the land of Lincoln. Don't know if the 16th president would have lined up in Collinsville with thousands of others to imbibe. But according to the Chicago Tribune, on the first day, there were $3.2 million in sales, 77,000 customers. Is this a good thing?
For Illinois, it's a great thing. I mean, and, you know, for Missourians, you know, whether they want to cross the river on this or whether they're going to have loyalty to their current people, you know, I don't know. I mean, that's an interesting thing to see as all this, like when there's all this stuff about who's going to have the license to grow in Missouri. You know, I think the people who've been doing it for years. I mean, I think there's some fellas probably up in Shannon County. You know, and I'd say if you've been doing it for years, you're getting the license, not some businessman.
And like somebody suing over that because they didn't get a license.
I saw that, the right to farm.
Using the farm bill, like anybody can grow anything.
But overall, it's a great thing for Illinois.
And Illinois, okay, you've got people waiting in line 4 hours. You have all this tax money that just gets generated basically out of nowhere, grew out of the ground. Get what I'm saying there? Hey, they're trying to get gambling going by Super Bowl Sunday, which is the first weekend in February. There's going to be another line, more people. Missouri, you got to wake up. It's not about morality, and it's not about, you know, doing the right thing. It's about helping the state not go broke. And you're silly not to get involved.
I thought it was really interesting that Illinois seemed to have truly crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's. There were no problems reported. They were very, very organized. And when you think about some of the financial troubles that they have had to face for the past couple of decades in Springfield, Governor J.B. Pritzker was he consolidating some of the pensions, and that took 70 years for a sitting governor to actually accomplish. So, I mean, I can see potholes being filled as we speak, and I think, and I'm worried.
Now, it's been around a while in Michigan, and Michigan's sales yesterday were 225,000. So some of the sales were the result of euphoria, you know, prohibition is over.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, Alvin says, with all due respect to our representative from Kirkwood, you're saying morality's not the issue. I think there are issues with gambling and with illegal, with drugs
Charlie,
that are not always that benign,
Charlie,
marijuana included.
I don't think you can say that with a straight face while alcohol flows freely everywhere. And
alcohol results in a lot of deaths. It really does.
okay, well,
A lot
but
of
that's,
deaths.
if that's
The point
so
is
how
this.
are we sacrificing our morality when it comes to alcohol, but we're not willing to sacrifice our moral high ground when it comes to marijuana?
Prohibition didn't work for alcohol. We all know that. It absolutely didn't work for marijuana. And I think that this particular horse is out of the barn. I don't know what kind of pun I'm going to make, but I think this is going to be, within 5 to 10 years, there's going to be so many states legalizing, well, obviously Missouri didn't, for medicinal and then recreational, and the conflict with federal law is going to be such that I just think we're going to move past it.
Okay,
And to Alvin's point, but Alvin's got a good point, and that is, in the short run, there is a legitimate net economic loss to Missouri of revenue across the river. And I joked about how if they had any more vices, we'd need another bridge.
Okay,
but there
right
is
now,
a revenue flow that's there.
As we speak right now, they're putting up billboards in Colorado, groups that are seeing some of the deleterious effects of marijuana, warning people that marijuana is not always benign, and that something like 1 out of 10 people become addicted, underage, and there's going to be an increase in people underage. Can I please speak? 1 out of 6 kids become addicted. And who then is going to provide the counseling? A friend of mine lives in suburban Chicago. His son is currently living in Idaho in some sort of retreat where he's trying to become unaddicted to marijuana. Who's going to pay for that?
Charlie, the addictive qualities.
But we're absolutely not addressing the elephant in the room, which is the billion, gajillion, trillion-dollar alcohol and liquor industry in this country. How can we?
We've been addressing that since the early '80s with Mothers Against Drunk Driving.
Yeah, well, we can do the same thing with marijuana. We can put some ads on TV saying, look, no one is saying that this is the panacea that makes the world great, but it helps some people get through the day. It takes the edge off. It's the same thing with a drink. I mean, can these things be abused? Sure. And gamblers can become addicted to that. But Charlie, no one's saying this is perfect. We're just saying it's better to legalize.
It's a moneymaker.
I think you guys are dancing in the street.
No, we're not.
Jumping for joy. Acting as if there are no problems. You're not waving any warning signs.
To use a line from Sanford and Son, and it was a lot more. It was less than $225,000. But Fred Sanford once said to Lamont, "Do you have $225,000 today?" And I'm using this Michigan figure, not the Illinois.
Yeah.
And then he said, "Do you have $225,000 tomorrow?" Case closed. Now, that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying even going into any of that, because it's the same as smoking or drinking or whatever other vice you got.
It's a
but
vice.
The fact of the matter is, they're cashing in on it. Horse racing,
Well,
gambling.
and if you're damaging, if you are dealing any blow
let's
to
all vape.
if you're dealing any blow to organized crime, I say have at it.
Well, and I'm also, look, I'm the father of 2 teenagers, and I equally don't want them to smoke, drink, vape, or do pot, you know, as children. I don't. And I don't want them to do any of the things, and we talk about it. But the point is, the idea that somehow alcohol would be more benign than marijuana.
Who's making that case?
No, well, I'm just saying,
you're talking
there's
about
no
we've
reason.
sacrificed morality.
And if you want to talk about addiction, we need to talk about the opioid crisis, which is 1,000.
Oh, legalize it. Make some money.
No, that's the point. Is we are talking about a real, legitimate killer, and the idea that marijuana is some big addiction problem is like reefer madness.
Well, you know what? It's the New Yorker and the New York Times, and I think, Ray, with all due respect, you're a little bit behind on the research.
Well, I
really do.
I'm way behind on the research too. But and this, you're putting us in a position where we sound cruel. But when did America stop because a 12-year-old had to go to rehab in Idaho someplace? And I know that sounds really cruel. I don't mean it like that. But what you're saying is put the brakes on anything that anybody abuses at any time. There is no United States of America.
Well, maybe I'm crazy, Cassandra.
Outlaw coal mining
Wendy,
too while you're at it.
All right. Well, there's a lot of things that we should be outlawing. Wendy, refugees are not illegal. They're coming into Missouri. Governor Parson, along with the 50 other governors, was given a choice by the president. Do you want refugees or don't you? And, you know, I think that there was some question. Maybe people in Missouri would say, no, we don't want more foreigners coming into Missouri. But the governor this week did announce that refugees will be welcome in the Show Me State. Do you think that he did this because there's an election in 2020? He's up against a Democratic rival, Nicole Galloway?
No. No, I think that we have not had too many discussions recently about Syrian refugees back in 2014, 2015, not only in this country but across Europe. There was a great deal of concern about Syrian refugees or about ISIS sympathizers sort of assimilating among the Syrian refugees and making trouble on the continent and here in the United States. We haven't had those conversations because this is not, that is not xenophobia. That isn't what it was at the time. That's not what it is today. The governor was very clear about how they have been legally vetted. They like every other refugee before them or immigrant before them, they have gone on to become valued members of every community that they've joined. So no problem, no harm, no foul.
First of all, I think he did the right thing. It took him a minute, but I don't know you can say woulda, coulda, shoulda if Nicole Galloway wasn't his opponent. Certainly, if he had a right, there is tremendous xenophobia nationally driving this issue. Not in this case, I'm talking, but nationally. And if he had a far-right challenger in the Republican Party, I think it would have had a different dynamic. It's hard to say that he did it just because he's got Nicole Galloway on the other side. Had he refused the refugees, it would have been an issue for her, though. So he's in an interesting spot because he's got a real opponent, and he is not somebody that is he's not an unbeatable candidate by any means. He's a real nice guy. Everybody likes him, but he's not. He doesn't have some brand that can't be run against. A lot of it's going to have to do with the national.
I don't know him, so I'm not one of those people who likes him. I don't dislike him, but he did the right thing. I mean, you know, trying to figure out if he had a political motive. I don't know.
Well, they all
did
have
the right thing.
Yeah.
Well, I think the people talking loudest about refugees and illegal aliens, I think if we went to their factory, they got a whole closet full of them. I think that he's listening to people outstate who have a vested interest in making money using refugee workers and also a vested interest in really not allowing their factory to get inspected, because I guarantee you there's probably some illegals in there too. So, oh yeah, everybody's talking real loud, but I bet you if you got down to it, it wouldn't be the same talk if we saw exactly who was working for them. Landscapers, like say, the
factory workers, but that's,
chickens,
yeah.
But it's been that way.
You know what? A lot of them are driving Uber right now, as we all know.
But I think people got in Governor Parson's ear and says like, no, we need refugees.
I think people need the labor. There's no doubt.
Did the right thing.
Ray Hartman. There was a proposal, I guess, that's floating around right now since the privatization effort for Lambert Field is no more. The mayor of St. Louis pulled the plug on that. And now people are saying that there should be regional governments of the airport, and that Jefferson County, St. Charles County, and St. Louis County should pass a half-cent sales tax increase to actually purchase or buy into Lambert Field, so they would co-own it with the city of St. Louis. An increase in the sales tax? What do you think?
I'm not sure about that part of it. I like to consider myself a regionalist. I'm always beating you over the head with it. And so the general concept that there would be any kind of collaboration that actually would include the surrounding counties, to me, is encouraging. So I'm not going to poo-poo. I thought it was noteworthy that the mayor of St. Louis apparently wasn't invited to the meeting. That doesn't mean people from the city might not have been there, but the point is, if I understood correctly, it was not. The mayor was not part of this discussion. But the point being, I think the fact that a regional solution is being discussed is a healthy thing. I'm really skeptical of sales tax because it's regressive, and I think there might be other ways to do it.
Well, I wouldn't consult somebody who wants to buy my house when I'm trying to figure out what price I want somebody to pay for it. So that's why the city is not there, okay? Plus, the city pretty much botched this whole airport thing in the first place, so they don't need to be involved in it.
Well, they own it, Albert. I mean,
no, I'm talking about the price, setting the price. I'm going to come to you and say like, hey, we got a deal here where this is how much we'll offer you for the airport. Who needs to have the city's opinion? They can just either say yes or no, or we'll start to bargain at that time. I think with the sales tax, which I would say that for the most part I'm against, this one 5149, I'm for. Maybe even 5248. What we need to do, like I'm a county leader or something, what need be done is, okay, what can we shave off? Can we, you know, some of these taxing districts that Nicole Galloway was pointing out are all corrupt and paying for people's vacations and carrying on. You know,
I agree.
Let's find a percentage or two to get rid of, so then this happens.
Because the sales tax is already too high in our area.
Right, and it's not necessarily that all sales taxes are bad, it's just that we have too many of them, so if we can find a way to eliminate
like
one
the
or
one
two
we
of
just
them.
did for the zoo.
Mayor Briggs of Bridgeton, who apparently was the ringleader, if you will, who I think this has been in the works for a long time. I think we're just now finding out about it over the Christmas holidays. They dropped these truth bombs to see over the holidays when it's kind of a slow news time to see how it lands, and
that's how they
this
did better
landed
together.
pretty
You're
well.
right.
Exactly.
Well, I will tell you
here's
this.
the deal.
Oh, real quick, the initial reaction, comments-wise, which I don't read on every story, but I looked at a Business Journal and, you know, Post and all those. The initial reaction was not as berserk as you might think it was. A lot of people said, like, this is a decent idea. And I think there's something to be said about it.
To increase your taxes $70 million a year so there can be regional governance? I don't understand what's in it for the little guy.
Well, Charlie, one thing that the city and the county have done really well together is the Zoo Museum District. I mean, to allow us to have the free zoo and free museums, maybe we could have something like that for the airport, where instead of sales tax, which I agree, I don't want any more of those, maybe it could be another property tax, the way we fund the Zoo Museum District.
And you said that if anybody if they opt out of paying that property tax, then they don't get to fly out of Lambert, right?
Well, they don't get free luggage. You know, we'll have something like that.
As somebody that's been arguing, and I'm glad you mentioned, although we both have to disagree about the free admission to tourists, but the point is, and it's interesting, we mentioned the sales tax flew through for a totally unneeded waste of money that came just like that. That's one of the things they could repeal, but to do what you're talking about. But I think that there's a lot of examples, more than people realize, where the city and county can work together. MSD is one. Now, it may not be warm and fuzzy, but that was that was a structural one. The major case squad's one. Regis is one. The 911 system. In crime, there's a lot of them that work.
I got to tell you something.
And the CVC works. We don't need two conventions.
I want to tell you guys something. The reason the Bridgeton mayor is interested is because they want to do what Pittsburgh's doing. They're building their manufacturing plants on or just next to the airport grounds. And so what they're doing,
What's wrong with
that's
that?
why Bridgeton's in it. He's not interested in regional governance.
So what? Does it matter?
Still, the idea of an aerotropolis makes sense.
How would it help a guy in South County to have someone from the county council on the board?
Because I think
they're already
representing their interest as opposed to some
just leaving it to an entity that we don't really know
From the
what goes on at the
outside?
Not
airport.
that bad for the traveler.
Oh,
the traveler goes to Lambert and flies out to New York. It works.
And we argued last week about we need to improve the
still
airport.
be able to fly to
You'll
New
still be
York.
right.
Exactly.
Right.
But it won't get any better because there's regional governance.
You don't know that.
Let's
You
go
don't
back to
know
the
that.
dead privatization plan. Okay. Now it comes out last week. You talk about these over Christmas bombshells. Somebody came up with the idea to let's drive Enterprise and let's drive all the rental car companies just away from the airport, so then we could charge whatever we want to for parking and all that. What a stupid idea! And no wonder Andy Taylor was mad about it and said, like, you know,
Let's move on. We got more topics. Alvin, I want to ask you about Illinois population. You know, Illinois had population that went down in the last decade more than any other state. In fact, all the contiguous states around Illinois, including Missouri and Michigan, Indiana, their population all went up. What's going on in Illinois?
Well, you know, I look at it, if you could say it's, well, the taxes or this or that. Illinois, to me, Chicago's, you know, booming, and I don't know what's going on.
Losing population.
Right, I don't know what's going on in downstate, you know, but I'll tell you what, one, the population went up by about 100,000 people on January 1st.
That's
And there will be people
And the ones who are there are happier.
Right, but no,
And
I
they're not leaving.
don't feed anything into that. You can, any state, okay, can say, like, yes, our population is going down or up or whatever, but the fact of the matter is, Illinois is a huge state. And those who want to leave, I'm sure they say, like, don't let the door hit you, because the people that are living there, who are coming in there, are everybody you want to come in. Young, affluent, going to
I
have
wonder
families, gonna buy
exactly, and I
houses.
wonder if
I don't
is it
think
a
so.
demographic? Is it a matter of baby boomers, retirers, people who are in the middle of retirement,
A lot
maybe
of that.
leaving,
Yeah. And the
going
weather,
to the
the
Sun
weather.
Belt,
The weather.
and the
No.
cost of living
People,
in Chicago.
it's not the weather, guys, because
But if you were-
Michigan's population increased, so did Indiana and Missouri, so it's
if
not the
you're
weather.
on
Iowa
if
increased.
you're on a fixed income, Chicago would not be a really easy place to live.
Right.
If you think about it.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah,
And I also
Charlie,
think,
I
and I
gotta
don't
say-
I think the state's a mess. It's got $134 billion in unpaid pensions. It's got $7.5 billion in unpaid bills. And the people there know their taxes are going up
So
every
where
which
are
way
they
from
going?
Sunday.
Where are they going? Are they moving to Missouri?
Some might be.
Well, all right. I'm just saying that you're taking like the people are just rats on sinking ship and just going for anything.
I
Wait,
don't know.
Our state, I mean, seriously.
On any given weekend in Chicago,
Missouri
it
increased
doesn't look like a
population.
sinking
Missouri
ship to me.
Missouri population increased. No, Chicago's population has gone down.
I would say this.
But I'm
Yeah,
talking
the
about
story
the
about all
interest.
Bob Clark of Clayco.
Yeah.
Talking about all the cranes, the big cranes in
Chicago,
Chicago.
you
no,
can-
Didn't
you know,
it
you
sound
can
like
make-
a boom town.
Yes,
He moved back.
You
But they
can
need
take
it.
numbers like this and make it fit whatever narrative. Some people say,
true,
oh, it's
too.
taxes. Well, you know, the fact is there probably are, like in places like, is it Florida has no state tax? There are people that will make a decision based on that, and that's fine. But to generalize it to fit a narrative, I think that Alvin's right. You know, to me, Illinois is doing just fine. And I mean, and to the extent it's not with pension issues,
The
people aren't-
population's going down more than any other state in the last 10 years.
Okay,
How's that
I don't
fine?
think we're
Well,
in
how's
a
that fine?
position
Well,
to throw
because
stones.
it's not.
When the nation's up to 330
maybe
million
it's-
people.
Maybe it's a natural. There's such a thing as maybe there were too many people in Chicago, and so they like.
and
I think
so
with
what?
the
Who
exception
cares?
of
It's not
with
that
the
big a
exception
deal.
of baseball teams, I'm sorry. I think we could learn a few things from the city of Chicago.
San
that's
Francisco,
probably true.
San Francisco got way too many homeless. They're driving out middle-class housing. It's just terrible, right? And what? You don't want to live in San Francisco? Come on. You can find reasons for these people. to
Who's
live
talking
in.
about San
No, I'm saying
Francisco?
you
Their
can
population is
You can
up.
find fault
All right.
with anything if you want to. And but you make it
I'm
sound.
just telling you, the population's down.
You make it sound
You
like
think
you want
thousands.
O'Leary's
People-
cow to knock the lantern over again. Just burn the whole thing down.
Okay.
And people are leaving California, Charlie. People are
No,
leaving
their
California.
population's up, isn't it?
But the-
California population is up.
You know,
There's only 10 states with a decrease in
the
population, but
fact
none of them
is-
lost more than Illinois over the last 10
But
years.
that's not
All right, let's-
necessarily
were they
a
northern
correlation with
states?
anything.
Were they cold weather states mostly that lost?
You had Vermont in there, you had Connecticut in there, and I don't know all the
Right.
But I mean, my point is,
Right.
it
Okay,
doesn't
now, let's move
correlate
on.
with
Let's-
anything.
all right.
It doesn't
Was
matter.
Mississippi in there?
Doesn't
Let's
matter.
all
It
move to
doesn't
Mississippi.
matter. I mean, if it was losing
Okay.
100%,
All right,
80%.
we're moving on. Bill, in Sunday's column, is going to write about there's a tense situation between the governor and the prison guard union at our state correctional facilities. Recently, the administration of Mike Parson decided to stop withholding union dues for the corrections officers. They haven't had a contract since September. What's your take on this, Bill?
Oh, well, it's really a fascinating story, I think, because the Missouri Correctional Officers Association, the union, endorsed Eric Reitens, who was, a right-to-work guy. And in fact, the only thing standing between the unions and right-to-work in the past couple of years was Jay Nixon, who vetoed the right-to-work in 2015. And for a union to endorse a right-to-work guy who then, signed the right-to-work bill, and unfortunately, as far as I was concerned, the organized labor got together, had a referendum, and right-to-work was rejected. But it's just an interesting union that the correctional officers have. And I'm with them. I mean, I think they should be allowed to deduct their dues.
But because they're outstate, right? I mean, if you're talking about mainly outstate.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
The prisons in Missouri are in small towns and
center,
rural
right,
areas.
right.
Our criminal class are kind of like the job creators.
Right.
And the small towns like to get these prisons, and so the guards tend to be, country guys, small town guys, and you can't find Democrats out there. So, the union not only endorsed Eric Reitens,
You
but
can,
I'm
but
sure
they're-
most of the people, the guys,
They're pretty
voted
quiet
for him.
about it.
Well, historically, they were Democrat. That was the part of the state that was
Right.
blue. And that's not some great revelation. But they first became the Reagan Democrats that moved over when they first did. And now a lot of them are the Trump Democrats who voted for Trump and Greitens and who were promised, and I don't want to make it a
Hey,
big
they
national
voted
thing.
for Romney, too. I mean, these people, they
Right.
vote Republican,
But they
right?
vote Republican, and every so often they get a first, and I guess it'll be interesting to see what the politics of it, if any, are this time. But that isn't going to sit well with them, obviously.
Regardless of politics, they all deserve a raise because we got the most underpaid, and it shows with all the lawsuits. So rather than jamming them up, Governor, you need to like work with them because we just keep paying out money for the lawsuits.
And I do think it
Okay,
will be an
Alvin,
issue for
all
Nicole
right.
Galloway.
Alvin, want to ask you about the loop trolley on the last day. The kiosks weren't working and one of the trolleys broke down. What do you make of this?
I make that the smartest people in the room ever since that thing actually tried to run was the City Council that would not let it cross the border into U-City until they paid the bond to just in case they had to take the tracks out. Those good folks must have known something. They must have known something. So I hope it figure out a way to do something with it. But
I think it's in bi-state's
Court.
and it does start with it, in my mind, whether we like it or I'm not going to defend anything. Obviously, it was fair, poetic justice how it ended. But there's a $900,000 dedicated source of revenue from users who, whether they go to the pageant or the restaurants or the retail shops in the Loop area, that's there. It is just unimaginable to me that Bi-State couldn't figure out a way to run a little trolley for less than that. I just don't
I
understand.
think we should just let it die peacefully.
But and it should be
we would
free
like to
in any
hear
case.
from you. You can always write us with your reaction to care of KETC, 3655 Olive Street, 63108. Don't forget those emails, letters at ketc.org. And we just love those tweets. Hashtag DonnybrookSTL. You can also listen to us on your favorite podcast, Apple, Spotify, Google Play, or TuneIn. And happy birthday to Joe Prosperi. Please remember him in your tweets tonight and send us your thoughts and comments because Wendy and I will be reading those on Donnybrook Your Turn, which starts in just a matter of moments. Thanks so much for joining us, but don't go away.
Donnybrook is made possible by the members of the 9 Network.
Donnybrook, your turn. I feel like I'm with the principal every time I'm sitting next to Charlie.
not
like
at all.
I'm going to have my hand slapped. But it was a great show. We had some interesting topics, and we'd love to know where you weigh in on each of them. So let's start with Bill in Rock Hill. Hi, Bill.
Hey, Bill.
Good evening. I have an important date I'd like you to note when it comes to Loop Trolley. The date was October 15th, 2012. And that was the day that Bob Archibald resigned as the chairman of the board. And I would say that is the day when everything started falling apart, because it would be another 2 months before he'd resigned from the History Museum. And he was afraid his continued involvement in Loop Trolley would only muddy the water at Loop Trolley. And nothing happened on Loop Trolley from that date until March 15th, 3 years later, when Joe Edwards finally broke ground. And keep in mind, during that entire time that no construction of that occurred, all their costs kept going up. And so people wonder why the thing didn't work. Well, you try running something with a budget that was set nearly 3 years before you ever started going, wasn't adjusted for inflation, it's like it's no wonder why what happened happened. Furthermore, they never really operated according to what they were budgeted for. All their budgets were based on operating 7 days a week, I believe 10 to 6 Monday through Thursday, or Sunday through Thursday, and then like 10 to 9 p.m. on Fridays and Saturdays. They never achieved that level of operation. In fact, they actually went the opposite direction. They started reducing hours. But I did pick up on one interesting little vibe, and I'm not going to reveal the source on this. I got to keep this confidential. It was basically the plan to have the thing fail all along. And I know that sounds shocking, but the bottom line was they really didn't want to run it in the long run. They wanted somebody else like Bi-State to pick it up. So basically, they designed the whole thing to fail.
Wow, that's amazing. Thanks a lot for the phone call, Bill. I just believe that there was never any demand for it in the first place. There was never a market study. Nobody was ever saying, hey, we need to ride down to Bolivar on a trolley. And in fact, as you know, the loop is already connected to Bolivar with Metrolink. So it's a duplication of service. Completely redundant.
Yep.
Good point.
Yep.
All right, thanks.
And Bill, if that is in fact true and it was designed to fail, I don't think anybody told Joe Edwards. So thank you for your call tonight. We appreciate it.
Hey, let's go to Ken in Festus. Hi, Ken.
Hi, Ken.
How you doing?
Good.
Watch the show, you guys. Just wanted to make a comment on the marijuana or the pot there, in Illinois. I work in the roadways, and my point is, like you were talking about alcohol and different things, but how, is it going to be if somebody does that with marijuana and they're on the roadways and I'm standing there trying to guide traffic and they come at me, and not stop.
Well,
that, is it any better or not?
I think the question is it any worse than having anybody who is driving under the influence of an opioid, any kind of painkiller, any kind of depressant, alcohol? I think it's to me it's all the same issue, right, Ken?
Correct, and that's where I'm against that. Passing that. I mean, I can see it for medical purposes, but however, if I'm out there and they're getting high, it's totally wrong.
Well, I'll say this. One question might be, do you think this society needs more medication? Who's next?
Let's go to Peter in North St. Louis. Hi, Peter. Welcome. You're on Donnybrook. Your turn. Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year. Hey, Ray was the provocateur today, and nobody rose to his bait. Nobody rose to the bait. First, we had Bridgeton Air Defense loving the airport, and then Ray, the regionalist, listed all the cities that could work together, all the counties. I mean, he was singing the song for Better Together that used to be laughed and jeered at before, and nobody rose to his bait. A new day is dawning.
Well, regionalism sometimes works. I think he was kind of right in some ways. Yeah, MSD and the Zoo Museum Tax District seem to be working well. But Metrolink, would we want Metrolink to be running the new airport? Fair point. Okay, Steve's in Afton. Hi, Steve.
How you doing?
Good.
I'm calling about the marijuana issue here. And I'd like to reassure your previous caller here, people will not run into it if they're smoking marijuana. I'm calling because I've actually smoked marijuana now for about 50 years. Probably started drinking about 50 years ago. And I would say that between the both of them, alcohol is a much worse product. Marijuana does not seem to affect me as much as alcohol does. I don't ever remember falling asleep and not remembering where I ever was under marijuana. Alcohol, I have done that. I remember driving under alcohol and being a pretty bad driver, maybe near running off the roads. Never done that under marijuana. And I smoke marijuana pretty much every day. So I'm driving the roads pretty much every day.
Oh, boy.
No problem. I wouldn't be able to do that under alcohol.
So do you drive under the influence of marijuana, sir?
Constantly.
He said constantly.
Yeah, that's not a good thing.
It's like it doesn't affect.
Yeah.
I mean, if I have a buddy who is a little paranoid, when he smokes, it might affect him that way. But other than that, no, it does not impair my driving at all.
Yeah, I kind of feel that you are one example, but of course, a study wouldn't be made up of one person. And I think I said on the show, you know, maybe 60, 70% of people who use it, it's going to be benign, no problem. But there's also that 10 to 30%. And yeah, front page of today's Chicago Tribune points out the studies show that marijuana can result in learning issues, memory issues, reduced IQ, and not necessarily for you, but for, especially if young kids are taking it. And I realize you have to be 21 to
You do have to be
imbibe.
21, and it seems that they are really going to be very, very stringent about the rules that are in place. So, Steve, thank you for your perspective. We appreciate it. Wayne is in Des Peres. Hi, Wayne. Welcome. You're on Donnybrook. Your turn. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. I want to talk to you about the Metrolink bus, our streetcar. I grew up in University City. I rode the Delmar streetcar when I was in high school all the way downtown almost every week because I had a downtown job. I rode the streetcars out to Creve Coeur Lake in the old styles. The new styles of streetcars were built by the St. Louis Car Company up out of North St. Louis on North Broadway. We had a level street. We did not have all of these concrete curbs that some engineer decided we had to have. We did not have the problem of automobiles hitting the streetcar hitting the automobiles along the curb and stopping the scenario for an hour and a half. It was a simple educational system or transport system that worked, and it was cheap, and you could transfer from one car to another. Yeah. Now we got a bunch of engineers that had to rebuild the cars that were antiques. We could have used a modern car with a shield over it or a fake street car over that over the foundation, etc. And it worked. And whoever designed this system has got to go back to school and start over. It has got to be one of the worst systems in the world with equipment that doesn't
thanks a lot.
work.
Appreciate it.
I know. Nowhere.
I know.
Thank you, Wayne.
You could go on forever because there's a lot of issues there, but thanks for the phone call.
Well, and so many people have pointed out, and we used them for our daughter's and son-in-law's wedding, the St. Louis trolley, the buses. I mean, and we've all seen them on the highways and byways around the city, and they're charming. And somebody said, why didn't we just, why didn't we just buy a few more trolley buses if we were that nostalgic or that hungry for yesterday? Because they are just as charming, and I think probably a lot less complicated when it comes to operating. So we thank you, Wayne.
But even if you have what you just described, Wendy, it's got to be on a path that people want for transportation. And I just don't see the demand for people at the History Museum to go to the Loop or vice versa. Certainly, nobody coming out of a bar or restaurant at the Loop says, hey, let's go to the History Museum.
Yep. That was the wrinkle in the plan. We have 3 tweets. Let's see what's going on in the Twitterverse. Hashtag Donnybrook STL. At Annie Marie Berry, Missouri is losing tax dollars to Illinois on legalized marijuana, just like it did with gambling. It's time for Missouri to act on legalizing recreational marijuana. Thank you, Annie.
Also heard from Zoe Mixon. Not sure why any young people would move there unless it's to Chicago or somewhere near family. Although I wouldn't be surprised if the population increases now that recreational marijuana is legal.
At Mark 63020, it Is it illegal for banks to open accounts for money made from this is a great question, from federally illegal drugs? Just curious, thoughts on money handling for these businesses. Isn't that a great question?
Yeah, the House passed that in September, and right now I don't think the Senate's acted on it, but Senator Roy Blunt, who's not in favor of cannabis, does believe that banks should not be penalized if they do business with legally operating cannabis operators. But you know, right now, the federal law says you cannot possess, distribute, or use marijuana. And so the banks are, really loath to be part of any operation that breaks federal law. Jim's in Granite City. Hi, Jim.
Hi. Just wanted to make a comment about the marijuana.
Sure.
As I understand it, the logic that you're displaying here tells me that the reason that we've okayed marijuana is because we okayed alcohol, and that if that follows, then we should be okaying opioids, and we should be okaying heroin, and we should be okaying anything people want to do, whether it's harmful or not. It doesn't seem to make any difference. I can't see the logic in that. It seems to me that we should use a little common sense and understand that if people use drugs that alter, for example, with alcohol, I don't think those are enforced very well, because there are a lot of people who have second, third offenses for driving under the influence and still get out and drive under the influence, and nothing seems to be done about it. So the idea that we should okay marijuana just because we okayed alcohol seems to me kind of nonsensical.
Well, do you have a problem, Jim, when it comes to medical marijuana, such as is the case here in Missouri? Do you have a problem?
No, but I don't. But I think it should be dispensed by a pharmacy with a prescription. Otherwise, I don't think it should be dispensed at all. If it's a drug, it's a drug, and if it's a drug that's under medical supervision, it should be dispensed by a pharmacy from a prescription from a physician.
I think the fact that we all know people, every single one of us, who have been diagnosed with cancer or any other condition, for which marijuana works in terms of pain relief and appetite, maybe an appetite accelerant, if you will, not a suppressant, of course, but whatever the word is I'm looking for. But I think that's one of the reasons why there's been such a shift in public opinion in this regard. Don't you agree, Charlie? I mean,
well, yeah, I think so, for the medical marijuana, for sure.
And I think it's just sort of a hop, skip, and a jump to, well, why not recreational marijuana? I think that it's all connected.
Now, in the New Yorker, Malcolm Gladwell writes about the studies of that, how there are no studies really demonstrating the beneficial aspects to marijuana. I'm not sure I agree with that, because I think that people, I can't imagine it's all placebo effect, that people are using marijuana, their symptoms of chemo, the ill effects are diminishing, and it's all placebo. I don't believe that. But I would like to see more studies, to take a look at some of the claims, because the claims are broad. There are glaucoma, chemotherapy, multiple sclerosis, depression, anxiety. You hear that marijuana can cure everything, and I'm not sure that's true.
I think it's going to take a good decade, really, before we know whether this is a good witch or a bad witch. So thank you for your call, Jim. Appreciate it.
Hey, Matthew, you're in South City. What's going on?
Hey, congratulations on 5 decades, and here's the 5 decades more. And happy New
Thank
Year.
you. Thank you so much. You too.
You're very welcome. I just wanted to call and say that, I'm all for what Illinois is doing over there with the marijuana. I don't think the government should be able to tell you what to do about anything, but me personally, it doesn't bother me at all what they're doing over there. I'm not for driving stoned and hitting cross guards. But as far as what they're doing, that's fine. The only reason I didn't go over there and support them is I didn't want to wait in line for 4 hours. I just went down the street and got mine.
Right.
But love you guys. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Matthew.
Thanks, Matthew. Appreciate it. Something tells me he probably wasn't calling from South City. We appreciate the call. Let's go to Steve in St. Louis. Hi, Steve. Welcome. You're on Donnybrook. Your turn.
Seriously, I have actually gotten on here. I'm very impressed. Thank you so much. I'm watching you on TV, and I'm absolutely confused. But what I called about was I've been confused with this whole marijuana proposition because, all you got to do is the President's Council on Marijuana and Drug Abuse that was commissioned under Lyndon Johnson in 1967. They'll tell you about all you need to know. But it's about the Joe Edwards, contribution to this thing. This guy has been a visionary. He has progressed. He has brought U-City. And, sometimes, it's some ideas just don't go the way you want them.
That's true.
And,
no question.
I think you're right. Last week, the Wall Street Journal had an obituary on Joe Siegel. You may not recognize that name, but he was the founder of QVC and the Franklin Mint, and he had some great businesses. But it also pointed out he had some failures, like 4 of them. He described one company. He said, we started out big and we ended up small. Joe Edwards has had a lot of great ideas. Walk of Fame, pageant, Tivoli, Moonrise, but this trolley ain't one of them.
That's right.
I agree. I agree with you 100%. It's just not. It's a railroad to nowhere. At this point in time.
Boy, that's the truth.
There's nothing down there.
Thanks, Steve.
I think we're going to be borrowing that, Steve, the railroad to nowhere, because that's very true. Very true.
I think I've been on that railroad before. Who's next?
Randy in Alton. Hi, Randy. Welcome. You're on Donnybrook. Your turn.
Hi. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
You too.
I'd like to speak about the part you had where the people were leaving Illinois. And in any event, I have a lot of friends and neighbors here. And a lot of the people don't like is like the cigarette tax and the gas tax. And then I have a neighbor here that wants to leave specifically because of real estate taxes. Now, this is Madison County. And another far-fetched part I want to bring up is I participate in sports shooting and all the oppressive gun laws that they have in Illinois.
Interesting. And okay, thanks for the call. Sure appreciate it. On the other hand, Illinois does not have a helmet law, does it? Oh, I don't think so, but I could be wrong.
Civil libertarians.
Terry, you're in O'Fallon. What say you? Terry.
Hello?
Hi, Terry.
Hi, Terry.
Yes. I want to speak on the marijuana issue in Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to me that, you've got a bunch of government propaganda that's been going on since the 1930s that's produced a bad image for marijuana. There are some people that just can't handle alcohol as well as a number of other drugs. I mean, I've known people that are on Prozac and Xanax and this and that. And my wife passed 8 years ago, and before that she was having hormone issues and was on medicines that almost split us apart. But I mean, everybody needs some sort of medication. It's a matter of getting the right medication. I just think that some people, they don't need to be smoking pot, and some people, they don't need to be drinking, and it's to each their own.
Fair point. Thanks a lot. I think we're generally over-medicated with the prescriptions and everything else that we're taking these days, but you're right. I can't speak for my neighbor. I can only speak for myself. Thanks.
Thank you, Terry. Let's go to Chris in Glen Carbon. Hi, Chris. Welcome. You're on Donnybrook. Your turn.
Hi there, Wendy and Charlie. I used to be, I'm a retiree from the U.S. Department of Transportation, and I know people who work for the Transit Administration, and I know that over $31 million went into the trolley. And I think that needs to be pointed out, that our taxpayers' dollars went into making it work.
So why not let's go back to the drawing board and build it right, okay?
$31 million, you're absolutely right. And I wonder if that $31 million would have been spent if it came out of the pockets of the promoters. Probably not.
It's a great question. And when we talk about going back to the drawing board, if it's not right after this amount of money, when is it ever going to be right? But we thank you for the input, Chris. Thanks so much for calling. Your tweets are welcome. Hashtag Donnybrook STL, and we have 2 of them right now.
Mark 63020 says, but what makes you believe that Illinois won't waste and blunder all this additional tax money? What makes you think they're good financial stewards now? That's a good question.
At Janet Marie, 1963, let them leave Illinois. There's more room for me. Very nice. Thank you, Janet Marie.
As we move to John in Oakland. Hi, John.
Hi, John.
Hi. Hello there.
Hey, John.
I want to just say that I'm older than Bill McCullough.
All right.
And I've never tried marijuana.
Okay.
However, I think that for one thing I know for a fact is that all the research that has gone on about marijuana has been under control during the early years, just like NRA has stopped research on gun control. All right, that's one. And Bill, anyway. The other point is that the federal government only outlawed marijuana in 1970. Now,
was it 1970?
Interesting.
1970.
Wow.
That's when the Food and Drug Administration called it a controlled substance.
Wow.
Right? That's okay. Now, all of the people who have been prosecuted under the for marijuana possession from day one till I don't know when have been severely injured, and to very much more than just having their records expunged. So I think the only reasonable solution to this is to reclassify on the federal law marijuana as a vegetable. It's like any other vegetable, and so that everybody,
like ketchup,
it takes the profit out of all of that, all of the prosecutions.
Thanks a lot, John. Appreciate that. Reclassify marijuana as a vegetable? No, I'm not sure that's in the works, but we hadn't heard that idea yet.
Nope. Very, very, very interesting, John. Thank you. Let's go to Carol in Chesterfield. Hi, Carol. Welcome. You're on Donnybrook. Your turn. And your little dog, too.
Yeah, I'm going to walk in the other room because they're seeing a shadow. Yeah, I wanted to comment on the medical cannabis, and there seems to be a lot of points missing. Number one, every mammal, humans, dogs, cats, horses have an endocannabinoid system, and there are receptors in that endocannabinoid system that want to accept cannabinoids in the cannabis or marijuana plant. And a lot of disease processes are actually caused by an endocannabinoid deficiency. As far as research going, there's been research all over the world, really strong research in support of the medical effects of cannabis. The problem is the United States will not allow, there is some research going on, I know in some children's hospitals, but it's not a bit like FDA research because the federal government won't allow it because they're still scheduling cannabis as a Schedule I drug. However, the United States, we have, I forget the name of the law, but the federal government has agreed not to interfere with any state medical marijuana programs. Now, I myself am a medical marijuana patient. What? Okay, it's I forget what you call it, but they signed some papers. and the government has agreed not to interfere. So I myself am a medical cannabis patient. I've been a patient for quite a number of years legally, and before that, probably illegally when I wasn't using
Unfortunately,
cannabis.
we're flat out of time.
If you could
Thanks a
call
lot, Carol.
back.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we're
Right.
sorry. We really are out of time.
Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Really appreciate it. Have a
We'll
great
see
week.
you next week.